the source of it, corn, is renewable. Every year, providing that yields the same and quite a lot of variables, we will always have a constant supply of corn, therefore we will always have a constant supply of the plastic. Now if we were to put this up against crude oil, which is what most of our plastics are made of nowadays, well now, our oil supplies are going down very quickly. So oil-based plastics are becoming very much less sustainable. Now the next one is directly about oil. As this graph shows the crude oil price projection, and it's not quite recent because as you can see, the projection starts before 2010. But as you can see, it's been gradually rising and then it's due to just continually rise because of demand, energy and a lot of other things, because oil is very important in our society. Now, Frederick Shear is the owner of the company Cereplast, which is a world leader in developing biodegradable plastics. Now, in an interview with The Telegraph, he stated that the tipping point for us is $95 a barrel. And at this point, our product becomes much cheaper. Now, as you can see, can't see very well by this diagram, but the price of oil, crude oil price per barrel, hasn't yet hit the $95 per barrel point. So, biodegradable plastics haven't taken off. They're still very much in the background. Now, if Shear is correct, when crude oil hits $95 per barrel, biodegradable plastics will be much more feasible. And then I think they will become so much more sustainable because companies will be using them a lot more readily because they're cheaper. Because all companies want the cheapest products, so we can get cheaper products. So if this were to happen, and by this projection, I think it's very clear that it will happen at some point, biodegradable plastics become so much more sustainable that companies then start to use them, so then they must become integrated in society. My next point was on population. Now, we all know that our population is rising quite a lot, as this graph also shows, and that at 2000 we had 6 billion people, and that is set to rise quite a lot. Now, there are problems that come with an increasing population, is that they need to be sheltered, they need to have food, they need clothing, they need so many more things. And a lot of these require land. If the land, and these requirements are much more important than those of having biodegradable plastics, which, if we were to look at properly, are a bit of a luxury, being able to have a plastic that we can just put in the ground and it just disappears. So, the land that would be used to make biodegradable plastics would be likely to be diverted into making more food to feed the population, making for houses to be built on, so that we can help, because we don't want to be having our increased population on the streets, because that wouldn't be particularly humane. This would cause the sustainability of biodegradable plastics to plummet dramatically, because one of the things with biodegradable plastics is that their sustainability is pretty much solely on that their source is renewable, and that we can keep having them and they keep disappearing, and it's just a continual cycle. If we were to take away the source, we just wouldn't be able to have them anymore, and we would just, we just wouldn't be able to have them anymore, and we couldn't use them. So, of course, they're not sustainable at all. Also, with this, there is the food crisis that we know is happening at the moment. A lot of people in Africa aren't eating properly, which is very sad. And we have a lot of problems already, and our population is relatively low compared to what the projection says. So it's clear that, well, in my opinion, I think the land would be much better used to feed the population, rather than to have a luxury of something that we just put in the ground and we just totally forget. Now, there is one possible solution. Now, this is a type of algae called blue-green algae, or to use its biological name, cyanobacteria. Now, this is a very unique organism, as what it does is it takes in carbon dioxide from the air and it takes in nutrients, converts it into a type of sugar called pyruvate, and then internally within the cell, it ferments this into ethanol. Now, I'm sure you're aware of ethanol. It is an alcohol, and I'm sure all you adults have enjoyed a glass of red wine quite frequently, or not so frequently. And what makes you a bit tipsy is the ethanol. Now, ethanol can then be converted through a chemical process into plastic, which is a very, very, very good idea. Because if we look down at this picture here, this is a proposed idea for how we could farm the ethanol from the algae. Now, algae has to be close to the sea because it needs the salt water and the nutrients from the sea. So it would have to, so the farm would have to be placed directly next to the sea, so on a beach of some sort. This would eliminate the problem of food production and of shelter, because not many people want to be living directly on the sea, because if you've got storms and everything, your house would get wrecked. And beaches aren't particularly fertile because you don't really see crops of corn growing on beaches. And also, another thing with this bacteria is that with our increasing levels of CO2, being led to believe that it's leading us into global warming or climate change, this bacteria takes it in, so it would also reduce the amount of carbon dioxide in the air. Now, the only problem with this is that it is very much in the development stages. We haven't yet managed to create a farm like this or harvest ethanol from the bacteria effectively to get a big enough yield to make enough plastic. Also, ethanol and ethanol being produced in this way is also very much in the interests of chemists trying to make biofuels. Because at the moment we are relying on oil quite a lot for our fuels, and this isn't working, we all know, in the media, and raising the carbon dioxide levels and that it's not being taken back into the environment is not good. Now, the ethanol produced from this can be used in cars, and it's been demonstrated in Brazil, where they fermented sucrose, or just a normal sugar, into ethanol, which they use in their cars because they have very low oil stocks. So if this technology were to come about, I think, although not expressly said by anyone because it's still in its developmental stages, I would think that it would be geared much more towards biofuels and things to help energy rather than plastics. Right, now, the conclusion. Personally, at the moment, I don't think biodegradable plastics are sustainable. I think because of discrepancies in standards, because of lack of infrastructure ready to deal with them, and a lot of other contributing factors, I don't think we could use them at the moment and would be sustainable. However, in my essay, I did come to the conclusion that if three things were to happen, I think that they would become very much sustainable. The first is that an international standard that is set and that we can all deal with is just set out, and then we know what we're dealing with, because then it will make the dealing with the waste much easier. Secondly, I think infrastructure definitely needs to be put in place to deal with them, because it's clear that if we put them into landfill, it just won't work properly, they won't break down properly, and we'll just have another mess we need to deal with in the future. And thirdly, I think we need a lot more investment into future technologies, because although future technologies can be quite scary to some people, like gene technology and that sort of thing, I think this could be extremely beneficial to the human race as a whole. And I'd like to take any more questions.
So, in effect, are you proposing, you said the crop was quite sustainable, but can you